Hey everyone, back with another video, and today we are going to be editing this shot right here. This was provided by dmills.design on Instagram. So I've been holding a contest all week over on my Instagram channel. This is the first winner, and so we're going to go through and edit this shot and see what we can do. Unfortunately, it is a JPEG shot, so I don't know how far we're going to be able to push it. As you can see, as we zoom in, it gets pretty pixelated, but when we're zoomed out, it looks decent. So we'll kind of see where we're going there. Another hot tip for everyone: if you have a camera and you have Photoshop and Lightroom and you're shooting and you plan on editing, I highly recommend to switch over to RAW, so all of the color information and everything isn't baked in. Now, if you're not going to be editing, obviously you don't want to be shooting in RAW because it's gonna give a flatter picture and things like that. But if you're going to be editing anyways, do yourself a favor and shoot in RAW if your camera supports that, or RAW plus JPEG. It just gives you a lot more latitude at the end of the day. So I don't know if this is directly off the card or if this was taken in and compressed into JPEG. The photo's relatively small, but we're going to see what we can do. So first thing, open this up in Photoshop. So let's go through and do some initial adjustments. This would be the kind of the same thing if you were working in Lightroom. So we're just going to go up here to filter. We're going to click on camera raw filter. Let's start from the top of the image and go down. So we're going to hit the graduated filter. Let's see if we can, this looks like a pretty good sky. So let's see if we can bring some more detail out of it and maybe make it a little bit more dramatic. It looks like it's right before a storm, possibly just after a storm or something of that nature. So let's bring the exposure down. Let's really play off of that kind of dark overcast. Let's try to bring the contrast up some. I think because the car is silver, I think I want to bring the saturation down a little bit and maybe bring the clarity up. I think that looks pretty good. I like to make the car the brightest thing in the image, so I also want to do the same thing for the foreground here. So we'll just bring that down a little bit. I do like the greens, so maybe let's go over to the HSL adjustments and let's go to saturation and let's bring those greens up a little bit. Maybe let's make them a little bit darker. So bring the saturation up, but we will make them a little bit darker. I think that we can also maybe saturate the reds a little bit and make those taillights pop a little bit more. And then I think the same thing, maybe we'll bring those down just so they're not kind of pinkish. It's really like a pop color in this image. So you have so much grays and variations of grays between the the wheels and the car and the asphalt and the sky, that's really a color that pops out. So let's do that. Let's go back over to the main panel and maybe for the whole image, let's bring the contrast up. Maybe let's bring the shadows up just a little bit, see if we can bring some of that out of the car. Maybe we'll pump the clarity a little bit. I think for this, let's go over the car. And let's see if we can bring some of those darker tones out. Clarity is crazy high there. I think that looks decent for now. So let's go ahead and click OK on that. Something that I accidentally did is I applied that to the background layer, but let me show you a cool trick. So if I hit Command Z, it'll undo all that, right? So I'll hit Command J, but now if I go back up to my filter panel, Camera Raw is the last thing that we did. So if I click that, it'll go ahead and apply all those adjustments that I just made to that image. So if you ever make a mistake, but you delete a layer or something and you want to do that exact same thing of the previous filter that you had, just remember that in the filter panel it stores that last one that you did and it stores the settings from it. So we were able to undo what we did to the background layer and then apply that. That'll help us just as we go down to see what we've actually changed from the image, and you know, if we've made a bigger mess or if we made something that looks kind of cool. So already off the bat, I think we're headed in the right direction. One thing that I want to do is go in and clean up some of the stuff on the side of the car here. So there are some reflections. So let's see if we can get some of that stuff out. So let's make a new layer. We're gonna try to not work as destructive as I normally do. So I've been watching some YouTube videos as well. One of the things that I have fallen into the trap of is I've been working really destructively. So I'll make a stamp visible layer, I'll merge it down, and then I'll just work on it, add a few adjustment layers, and then stamp visible, merge it down, things like that. So it's not really the right way to work, especially if you're going to work in a area where you're responsible to somebody else, or somebody else can come back and say, hey, I need you to fix this. In that workflow, you kind of hose yourself. I normally shoot for myself and I just edit for myself, and you know, once I do an edit, it's done. I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to go back to it. So I've kind of gotten into a habit where I just edit like that, and probably not the right thing to teach everyone. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to work non-destructively on this image as much as we can. We're going to get to a certain points where we need to do some things because of plugins or things like that, where you know, you have to make a stamp visible layer because you have to apply it above and things like that. But for the most part, I'm going to try to show you how we would do that without working destructively. And one of the ways is we're going to make a new layer, layer 2 there. So we have our layer. We're going to come up here. We're going to work with our clone stamp tool, and we're also going to work with our healing brush tool. And we're going to change both of these to current and below. So let's start with this. Let's see what we can do here. We just want to get rid of some of these lines and kind of clean it up as much as we can. Again, we've got kind of a small image, and we're getting some artifacts just because of some of the poor pixelation in the image, but let's see if we can clean it up some and make it a little bit better. And so what I'm doing is as I go through, every time you see the cursor do this, I'm just sampling a new area. So I'm hitting my Option or Alt key, and I'll just sample a new area, and then I'll go in and clone that area over. So we got rid of a couple of those distractions there. I think we can maybe help this out with some dodging and burning. So again, working non-destructively, let's make a new image or a new layer in the sense of doing things right. Let's rename this. So let's call this clone, or maybe cleanup. And let's call this D and B for dodge and burn. And so what we want to do here is we have a blank layer. We're going to go up to Edit and go to Fill and go to 50% gray and click OK. And so you're like, cool, you made a gray screen. Good work. Well, we want to go down here and go to Overlay. And so now you're like, well, good job, you did nothing. But now what that's going to allow us to do is we're going to take our paintbrush tool. So we have a paintbrush tool here. It's just a normal brush. We're going to bring the hardness all the way down. We have the size. We'll control that with our bracket keys. We're going to lower the opacity of this layer way down, so maybe like 20% just to get started. And then we're going to hit D to go to our default foreground and background colors. And so now what we're going to do is anywhere where we want the shadows to be darker, we're going to go and we're going to paint in black. And so right in here, and you're like, wow, that was not good. No. Let's bring the opacity down some too. And so we touched up that shadow. So now let's hit X and go to the highlights. So it's right next to it. And we'll come in here and we'll paint there. And then let's go back. We'll hit X and then we'll come down here and we'll just paint under here. Fill that shadow up. And then maybe the same thing on the side. We'll get that. Let's go. Let's paint on white on some of these spokes here. And on the edge of the wheel. And then maybe up here. Skip back to black. Maybe we come in here again. And so if we look at this layer, you can see we've made the whites or the white area brighter. We've made the grays darker. And what that it helps cut out those areas more, and it helps emphasize those lines, and it helps really kind of make it more 3D. So again, just painting in black, we're gonna go over this. And because we have the layer opacity down and we have our opacity on the brush down, we can go over it a few times and just build that up. So we're just gonna go along some of these body lines to help chisel them out. And then we'll skip over to white, go in here, skip back to black, get this line. Same thing, we'll go back to white, we'll really hit this. And then this back here. And in black, we'll come up to this line. And so let's look at how terrible this looks. So if you click on normal and we bring the opacity all the way up, you can kind of see what I did there. So if we turn that back to overlay and we bring that opacity back down, you can see we're just adding some detail to the car, helping those body lines pop out just a little bit more. And if you want, what you can do too is you can get your pen tool if you want to be more precise than what I was doing there. So let's turn this off for a second. Let's make a new layer. We'll fill this again with that 50% gray. We'll change it to overlay. And so if I wanted to come in here with my pen tool and really get in this body line here, make the selection, then I can take my brush with white and I could come in and just paint right on that piece. And then if I hit Command D to deselect that and we change the opacity, you can see it's a little bit cleaner than what we did underneath. It depends on what level of detail you need to take your work to. So if you really need to carve out those body lines and you really needed those precise, you didn't want any bleed, you wanted those precise selections, you'd kind of handle it like that. On some of these areas you can also get away, if you don't like the pen tool, some of these sharp body lines, you can probably get away with the polygonal lasso tool. So if you just select, and it really works the same way, you're just not going to get a smooth. But I can go in here, now that I have it selected, I can take my brush tool, I can go to B, making sure I'm in black, and I can just go in here and paint that around. And then if I bring down the opacity, you can see it just helps. It helps chisel out that line. The other thing that you can do is if you just want it on the edge and you want it to taper off, you can take a selection tool, whether you use the pen tool or the lasso tool, and you can just draw a line here. So this is going to be your body line. And then if it's just going to fade off, you can do something like that. Make a selection. And you can see you just want the white right on this area, right? Because you're going to have something in here and it's going to fade and go into a gradient. What you can do is take your brush tool, again in white, and you can just paint on the outside of this. Since we're using a really soft brush, it's going to go past this area of where the circle is. So we can just paint on this side of the line, and it'll help punch out that body line quite a bit more. And since we're selected in here, it's not going to paint anywhere outside of that. We're just coming right along that line. And so if we hit Command D and we turn that off and on, you can see what it did to that area. So it really helped define that line. I think next, let's go to the window, the side window here, and I think we can make this a little bit darker. Let's make it match the back window. So we're gonna come down to layer 1, and we're gonna come in here just inside of this window molding. We're going to trace all the way around. So now that we have that selected, what we're going to do is we're going to hit Make Selection, 1 pixel feather, which might be a little bit too much for this image, but we'll see. And then we can do one of two things here. So we can hit Command J, and so now what we did is we made a copy of that side window. So if we turn everything off, you can see that we just have the side window there, right? What we can do is if we want to make that darker, we can play with the blending modes. So we can come up here and we can click multiply. And the good thing about that is it instantly makes it darker, and it keeps some of those reflections from the sky and the side window. The other thing that you can do is you can take that selection, you can make a new layer, and you can fill it with black. And right off the bat, I mean, that doesn't look great, but what you can do is you can bring that opacity way down. So if we hide that bottom layer, you can see that this is the layer that we just filled with black, and we can kind of control how dark or light we want that. So it's two ways you can go about that, or you can do it both ways and you can kind of mix and match it. So let's just make a quick stamp visible layer, see where we are at and where we've come from and what else we need to do. I like the feeling of this image so far. I think if we want to take it to another level, maybe we go through and try to get rid of some of these lines. Let's clone those out. So let's work on that next. So again, in the spirit of trying to work non-destructively, we have our, let's put these in a group. We'll call those side windows. And let's go to our cleanup layer, and let's see what we can do with this line right here. So let's go to our clone stamp tool, and we're just going to select next to it, and we'll just come through and we'll start painting over this. One thing we want to be cognizant of though is we don't want to get repeating patterns as we go through. So we want to vary it up and clone from both sides. So that looks decent. Let's go over here. Let's do the same thing. And so one thing I try to do is if there's like a definitive line, I try to copy that over, and that's kind of my starting point. So around where the shadow was, and same thing here with this asphalt crack. If we don't want to get rid of that whole asphalt crack, we're just gonna clone some of that in here. That way it looks like it lines up and matches. Here's another example of that. So we would want to take this area of the curbing, and we'll use that to clone in. What we don't want to do is we don't want to introduce those repeating patterns. So again, just kind of sampling from both sides. Now this gets tricky because we're kind of running out of real estate here to not get repeating patterns. Because of the depth of field here, you can see all of this is pretty in focus and it goes quickly out of focus. So you can't really use the in focus stuff to get rid of that. This will be so far in the background that I don't think you'll notice any of it. So it doesn't need to be super perfect, but I think it'll just go a decent ways to help clean up this foreground. And then just one more line over here. One more thing I think I want to clean up is, I don't know if this is a street sign or something, but everything else in the background is very organic. So you have all of these trees and weeds and shrubbery and things like that, and that one straight diagonal line just kept, my eye kept going back to it. So I think that looks better. Let's again make a stamp visible layer. Let's see where we are now. So we've gotten rid of some of the distractions on the side. We've made the window a little bit darker. We've cleaned up some of that foreground. Got rid of that thing in the background. Sky's a little bit more dramatic. I think we can start working on some color and see if we can get this car to pop a little bit more off of the background. One thing I do want to do that I just noticed is come back in here with the brush tool, and let's go with our white tool. We're going to go back in our dodge and burn, and we're just going to paint on these exhaust tips a little bit and try to get them to pop a little bit more. Good. So I think I want to try something in the background. So what we need to do is we need to select the car because we don't want it to affect the car. And rather than using the pen tool, I'm going to try to do the quick selection tool. So what this will allow us to do is if we click here, Photoshop does its wizardry and we'll pick out sometimes. I think because this image is a little lower resolution, we might have a little bit harder time. And if we make our brush smaller, it tends to do a better job. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm just clicking and dragging, and then Photoshop goes in and tries to find a line to pull it to. Now, where this kind of fails is in areas like this, because it can't really tell the difference between the sky and the car. So what you can do is after you get that selection, you can hold down your Option or Alt key. You'll get this minus, and then you can come back in and you can paint around. I think that in most situations, the pen tool is much cleaner and it's a much easier tool to use. Actually, it's not much easier. It yields much better results. But I know that there is a fear of the pen tool, or people just haven't gotten used to it yet. So here's another way that you can get a selection. And honestly, I use both. So if you have something that is very different colors from the background, sometimes the quick selection tool works very well. And you don't need to go through and do the pen tool. Photoshop's math will do it for you. In this situation, I think the pen tool would probably be a better choice just because of the lines and things like that. But for what we're doing, I think this will work just fine. So what we want to do is we're going to make a new layer right above layer 2. And I have a brush, and I'll link to the YouTube video that I found this tutorial from, but there is a YouTuber and photographer that I recently saw some of his videos, and one of the videos that he made was a video on how to put dust or smoke into an image, and he has a video on how to do this preset of a brush. And so what it does is it varies the size and the shape of the brush, but the cool thing that it also does is it will vary the color as well, so we can make this match the background and help it to blend in. So with layer 6 and with our selection still made, what we want to do is we want to make a layer mask. So right now the black area is being hidden and the white's being exposed. We actually want that the exact opposite. So we're going to hit Command I to invert that mask. So now that we have our layer mask, we're going to make sure that we're painting on the transparent layer. We just set our colors, and so what we're going to do is we're going to come in here and we're just going to paint over this. And hopefully we're going to give the impression that it is foggy in that background. And we're just going to blend it in. And maybe we bring some of that into the foreground. And so now this is on its own layer, so we can bring back the opacity if we want. And then the other cool thing, if that's too white or we want to make it a different color, what we can do is we can go to our adjustment panel, and we have these photo filters here. And we can make a clipping mask, and then we can go in and change some of these. So if we want it to look more cool and blue to match the sky a little bit more, we can do that. And we can just pull down that intensity. We can also change the opacity here. And we can change the opacity on this layer. And then I don't know if I like that as much on the asphalt, so let's go back to our normal brush tool, painting in black on the layer mask. We're just going to go through and get rid of some of this on the asphalt. So I think already that kind of pushes that background back a little bit. It makes the car kind of the star of the show. I think I still want to darken down that sky a little bit. So I think let's make a curves layer. Let's bring that up above. We don't want that clipping. And maybe we can utilize this. We'll utilize that that layer mask for the car. And let's see if we can bring down and now, since we made this more visible, we need to go back in and we need to paint on this mask in black. Because we really want that background to be bright. We'll handle the streets separately. Overall, I'm pretty happy with the way we're looking here. I think let's make a stamp visible layer. So from this point underneath, we're all working non-destructively. Let me save this really fast. And let's see what Color Effects Pro will look like. Yeah, I really like that. So just help pull some of the blue out of the sky. And let's click OK. So we have that. And then let's take this layer and let's go to Camera Raw one more time. I think I again want to bring this up. I want to darken this down a little bit. I really want that car to pop off of this background, so I'm going to bring this up slightly. And then I'm also going to bring the saturation down just a little bit. I think we can probably add some clarity overall to the image. And now let's go over to sharpening. Let's bring the sharpening up a bit. We'll mask it out just so we're making sure we're just masking those fine lines. We can probably put in some noise reduction. So we'll go ahead and OK on that. See what a little light burst on the side will look like. So let's go to our gradient tool. Let's bring white to our foreground color. Second gradient, the radial gradient selected. And then we want this second one here, foreground to transparent. And let's see what just a little beam of light here will look like. maybe we mask that off of the bottom just a little bit. So with a layer mask, painting in black. And maybe we do one more, but on this one, let's do black, and let's do, actually maybe let's grab this color in here. One of these like really dark blues. Let's go from right here. Let's grab our gradient tool. And with this second one selected, let's pull this way. See if we can just darken this down some. There, I think that's cool. Yeah, so let's make our final stamp visible layer, and let's check where we're at, and I think we'll call this this one done. So here's where we started. I think it's a cool image, and here's kind of where we ended up. So we added some fog in the background. This is maybe a little bit too bright. I think what I want to do to help with that, I think we're going to come in here and with our brush tool, I don't like how these two colors are too different. I think they would blend together more. It looks like there's blue smoke back there instead of it just being mist. So I think what I want to try to do is take my brush tool and with that soft edge, just paint over the top to try to bring some of that back. I like the color in the grass, and I like the variety in there. I'm not really sold on it being up in the sky. So I think that that's cool. Let's hide these ones really fast. We'll go through, make our stamp visible layer. Again, that's the problem with working destructively. I specifically waited till the end just in case. And then we'll go down to our Color Effects Pro again. And we still have that selected, so we're going to click OK. And then we can just turn on those two layers again. And so let's make that visible layer again, and let's see what we look like from beginning to end. So here's our final, here's before. So as you can see, working from the bottom, we got rid of the lines. We made the car pop off a little bit more. We accentuated the colors. We cleaned up some of the things in the side. And then the background, we kind of helped get rid of those bushes, really make the car the emphasis of it. We really added some drama to the sky, made it darker over here, so your eye goes from brightest to darkest. So you go from the corner here through the car down to the darkest corner, and I'm pretty happy with it. I think it looks cool. So that's going to be it for today's video. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you like what you saw. If you do, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and make sure, if you're not already, to subscribe. I'm going to try to make these videos a more frequent thing. So until next time, take care.